Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another CPC Strategy hosted webinar. Today, co-hosted with our partners over at Windsor Circle and What Counts, I should say. And today's webinar topic, advance your advertising strategy with customer lifetime value data. Now, this is a really interesting topic just because, and you'll see as we get through the presentation here, I believe Jason has some great statistics on this, but again, the importance of understanding customer lifetime value data, or CLV, as you're going to hear throughout the presentation, is only growing, and the need for a lot of companies to begin adopting a CLV-centric or a strategy with some component of CLV data is only getting more and more important. So again, really excited to bring this presentation here today with our partners over at Windsor Circle. And with that, we are going to just jump into today's logistics. So again, like always, nothing really changes with this slide, but we do get a lot of questions about the session recordings and the slides, and they will be sent out to you within 48 hours to your email. So the email that you use to register for this webinar, we will be sending it out to you there. If you don't see it within 2 business days, though, feel free to shoot us over an email at webinars@cpcstrategy.com. We'll be able to just answer any questions that you have or be able to provide those links to you, again, like I said, in a few days as it takes us to turn it around. Secondly, we do have poll questions available today. I believe we'll be launching it within the next few slides here, but really it gives us an opportunity to tailor the content to the needs of our audience here. So the question is going to be really about your strategy and if you're currently implementing CLV, and by understanding the percentage or the number of people that are really using a CLV-centric strategy, it can allow us to talk about today's topic a little bit differently. And so again, wanted to throw that out there, that your participation in that is only going to further your experience with us here. And lastly, again, no really something different with the webinar. It's just questions to our panelists. So we get this all the time from just our survey feedback, that the questions are really sometimes the most valuable portions of the presentation in being able to directly answer your questions, or maybe we were unclear on something and being able to clarify it. Feel free to use the question chat box functionality on the bottom right. Again, it is there for you as a resource, and we would love to answer your questions directly throughout the presentation, and I'll be on the back end facilitating that discussion and adding those questions onto the queue. So feel free, again, to just ask as many questions as you want and really getting the most out of our experts here today. The last thing that I will say is that we do have a few handouts available as well. Again, just a few resources to make sure that you are getting the most out of your time here. We have documents such as a Google Shopping Guide for 2018, or how to create a killer customer loyalty program. Just a few of the handouts that we've added in that section on the right, just so that, again, you are able to download these resources and to look at them at a different time. So with that being said, I am going to talk about CPC strategy a little bit today and introduce who we are. We were founded in 2007, and we are a Google Premier partner with over 400 plus retail clients. I believe we're at 500 now, actually, and we do have solutions spanning retail-focused PPC and shopping, Amazon sales acceleration, Facebook performance marketing, and creative services. And so that is a little bit about who we are and what we do. And Polly did want to turn it over to you now and give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about what counts in Windsor Circle.
Sure, thanks so much, Anson. And so just to tell you a little bit about who we are What Counts in Windsor Circle. We are recently merged 2 companies, What Counts and Windsor Circle. What Counts is in charge of all of leading digital marketing communications, and Windsor Circle takes on as being the automated personalized platform that attaches into that. So together we are a leading digital marketing platform to help you communicate relevantly across email, social, and display networks. So in the past year or so, we've seen 35 billion emails annually. On the retail side, which is where Windsor Circle tends to focus their time, where I spend most of my time, we have about 150 plus CPG and retail clients. And across industries, we have about 450 plus clients. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see just some of the retailers that we tend to work with. Some great names over there as well. So that's a little bit about what we do.
Awesome. Thanks, Polly. And to those that are tuning in, obviously we've done webinars in the past with Windsor Circle, always great partners to have. And now with the merger of What Counts Too, of course, just more than happy to have you here speaking on customer lifetime value. And I know that you're going to be talking a little bit about implementing that through your email strategy as well. So again, just really a lot of knowledge to share with our audience today, and excited to have you here. Now, before we do introduce our speakers, again, like I said, did want to launch that poll question. The poll question being, are you currently using CLV to measure your brand's profitability? So again, it is really interesting to note because depending on how the answers do pan out, it will shift kind of the narrative of our presentation today. And so really curious to see what our audience is using or what their strategy is. And Polly, Jason, we should start with you, but really interested to see what do you think the spread is here? Do you think that a lot of people are using it, maybe you plan on doing it, or don't just currently measure CLV and not necessarily planning on it as well?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be a little bit of a pessimist here, and I'm gonna go with that. I guess a little bit of half and half and half. No, but I plan on it. I feel like that's gonna probably be the biggest answer, just because of what we've experienced with clients internally.
Right. And Polly, how about you?
Well, Jason stole my answer there. I think we're a little bit pessimistic with the glass half full on top of it. My thoughts are most people are probably going to say, I'm planning on it, but have not done it yet. But I'm hoping to be pleasantly surprised.
Right, and I'm sharing the results with our audience here, and I know that Polly, Jason, you can't see the results, but we do actually have, Jason, I think you hit it on the head, 50%, close to it, 45% are saying that they don't, but they are planning on it, and then an additional 9% are saying that no, and they currently don't measure CLV, probably not really too invested into getting to know a little bit more about it and implementing it. But we do have half of the audience members saying that they are currently implementing some sort of CLV metric or way to kind of just report and see on those numbers. So again, I think you both hit it right on the head. Again, I don't know if that's necessarily being a pessimist, but I think that is being very realistic with how we are just seeing that shift in the market in terms of how people are prioritizing and wanting to learn more about it. So I did accidentally skip ahead one slide, but Polly did want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience and who you are?
Sure. So my name is Polly Flink. I'm the Director of Marketing here at What Counts in Windsor Circle. I've been with this company for about 4.5 years now. On the day-to-day, I'm doing a lot of things that I tend to speak to audiences such as this about. So I am heading up all of our automations, our advertising, content creation, webinars such as this, etc. So a lot of what I'm speaking of comes from our company and the knowledge there, but also from my own experiences too.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Polly. And obviously love to have Polly in on another webinar with us. And now definitely someone that is no stranger to CPC webinars. We have Jason Bell, Senior Retail Search Manager at CPC Strategy. Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and then just hop right into the agenda afterwards.
Sure. Awesome. Thanks, Anson. So if you guys have been on webinars with CPC, on the Google side at least, you probably heard my voice before. So I'm happy to have you guys back. If you haven't, then welcome. We have, again, as Polly mentioned, she's here talking about a lot of CLV stuff, and she's definitely an expert in this area. So I'm very excited to have her here. In terms of my expertise, so I've been working with CPC, I want to say about maybe 7, maybe even 8 years now. I mean, every webinar, it seems like I always kind of forget. But it's been quite a while. So I definitely have a lot of kind of in the weeds experience. So working directly with a lot of our clients on several different things. And CLV happens to be one thing that's been coming up a lot more often recently and something that we're paying a lot more attention to. And with that said, I do want to kind of move forward here and kind of kick off the presentation. So let me make sure the click control is working. Perfect. So to start off today, I want to go through the agenda really quickly. So we're going to be starting off with just introducing CLV-centric marketing. Again, customer lifetime value. We're going to be using that acronym CLV a lot today. Evaluating your brand's profitability. Into augment segmentation for new lifetime customers. CLV email marketing focus strategies, and then rounding off the presentation with CLV advertising strategies outside of email to acquire, retain, and really just kind of grow profitability and CLV as a whole. And to start, so today I want to start with, let's see here, we working? Might be lagging. There you go. Perfect. So on the rise, customer lifetime value. And again, so introducing, excuse me, that's the wrong one. Here we go. Introducing customer lifetime value centric marketing here. Move that over, sorry. So on the rise, customer lifetime value. So the first thing I want to point out here is data from a Mary Meeker report, which came out a couple of weeks ago. So it's very, very time relevant. If you're unaware what the Mary Meeker report is, it's basically a huge report created yearly by Mary Meeker, which provides us internet trends, and it covers a ton of topics. So it's super comprehensive. I definitely recommend taking a look at it, but understand that there's a lot to look at. So we've kind of cherry picked here this set of data around CLV, which is our main topic today. So what we see here is basically that CLV has been ranked the most important ad spend optimization metric. So, this past report that came out a few weeks ago, and the important part here is that CLV, we've come to recognize, is powerful to not only maximize value from your current existing customers, but it also enables increased investment in new customer acquisition by the understanding of what a new customer actually brings to your business. And then understanding how to move people from that new customer to maybe a single purchaser, to a multiple purchaser, and then eventually to a loyal customer or VIP and someone who is a loyalist and advocate for your brand. And so I want to move on to why we incorporate CLV marketing. So the first off, I want to start with the notion that CLV and profit, they go hand in hand, right? So the initial acquisition by a customer is ROI based, and it's based on that individual transaction's profit. But it can be further expanded by the knowledge of CLV. So if you're only just thinking about a single acquisition and optimizing towards that, you're really limiting yourself. And then when we look a little bit more at this, I kind of want to use it as a timeline here from left to right almost. And it's really just an understanding of the least to most sophisticated way to evaluate marketing spend, and that's going from left and right. So for example, a least sophisticated way would be using, optimizing your ad spend based on clicks and CPCs or conversion CPAs versus advertising or optimizing on profit and ROI, or in this case, CLV and actual customer equity. So the goal is really to move from a point of where maybe you're only, a business who's looking at CPA, which again, it sounds like 50% of the audience today are using and looking at CLV. So that's awesome. We're already kind of in that profit-driven marketing portion, but the real goal is to move into that and understanding what CLV actually provides you in terms of insight. So moving into the right side here of this image, it's about incorporating CLV-driven profit into your current marketing KPIs because it has proven to be a highly effective growth strategy. So you see here the 4 words, so know, find, grow, and retain. And I kind of want to go into each one a little bit here. So know is basically understanding the CLV data points that allows you to leverage the equity that you have built within your current customer base. And so what that does is it allows you to lead a more wise marketing investment and different ad spend in different segments and different areas based on what we feel like is going to improve or grow your CLV and overall your profits. Second here, find. So finding new customers and using the existing customer profiles to find them. So using lookalike audiences, similar audiences to your current, say, loyalist or VIP customers, and using that to find new customers who are similar to those users. Third here, excuse me, grow. So growing returning customer base by understanding their purchase patterns. And then lastly, retaining those customers and loyalists and VIPs through coordinated and informed reacquisition efforts. So I think Polly will definitely be going into some of that on the email side. And it's definitely something we do on our end, as well within Google and within AdWords on, say, remarketing efforts and display, and maybe dynamic remarketing if you have products in a product feed.
Yeah, and Jason, I was actually going to allude to that as well. Again, I really like this graphic because it shows kind of the shift in terms of focus or where you can start in terms of conversion tracking all the way to profit-driven marketing. And like we said and introduced, later on, we'll have Polly actually provide actionable strategies on the email side. And I know, Jason, you're going to be talking about acquiring, retaining, and growing an actual AdWords strategy that you can implement or lists that you can implement as well. So again, really excited to get to that section too. But again, I like this graphic and I enjoy that you called that out, that those are specific things that we'll be talking about in a little bit here.
Yeah, because something I do notice right now is I want to say most of what I work on with my clients initially starts off with ROAS, right? That's kind of the big metric a lot of us use, and that's really looking at last click, really limiting our view and limiting our overall scope of understanding what our advertising dollars are actually doing for the business as a whole and profitability. So, the goal is really to move down into profit and ideally into CLV and really using both of those hand in hand and understanding what we can do to grow the business as a whole and not just looking at each individual channel in kind of a vacuum.
Right. And just to kind of pop in there too, exactly what you're saying, piggybacking on that, ROAS is great, but it doesn't tell you the type and kind of customer that you are busy acquiring. So it might be someone who, yes, they bought from you and the ad was doing really well, but are they going to stick around? Are they going to have a high CLV
Right.
that's going to pay off in the long run? So using
Exactly.
CLV in conjunction with that is a great way to really just create that whole picture that you're talking about.
Exactly. Perfect. So let's move on to customer lifetime value weight. So there's a couple, kind of or a few words here that I kind of want to go over. So it's really, these are the insights that are provided by customer lifetime value. So initially, so realize customers' potential revenue, and I'm going to go into each one of these a little more in detail, but let me just read through them real quick. So realizing a customer's potential revenue, regulating customer acquisition spend more precisely, discover which ad platforms send most profitable customers, then learn the behavior patterns to acquire, retain, and grow your customer base and in turn your profit. So to go into each one of these a little bit more is in the realize portion here, it's really about understanding that acquisitions or a single acquisition can be worth far greater than the initial dollar amount that's attached to it. Right. So if we're only, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, if we're only looking at the individual transactional views of profitability per each transaction, then you're really selling yourself short and you're limiting your overall potential. And that's because every new customer represents an opportunity to create a loyalist. And this should lead you to maximizing your resources to invest in gathering, say, additional acquisitions and new customers. And then secondly, users who purchase once and then purchase, say, a second time, I want to say have roughly a 33% increase in becoming a loyalist. So there is a lot on the table that you could be losing out on if you're not looking at past this, single conversion and maybe the profit of that one conversion and understand, okay, is this a type of user who is likely or maybe fits into the same segments that our loyalists or our VIPs are sitting into? And if they do, then we do want to continue to be aggressive in remarketing to them and trying to get them to get into that second purchase, third purchase, fourth purchase, etc., and get them to become a loyalist. And so that's kind of what we're dealing with and what we're thinking about when we're talking about customer lifetime value and actual weight it holds. Second here is a regulate. And so that means understanding the CLV purchase patterns that they can and they should inform the allocation of your new customer spend versus your returning customer spend and frequency of how often you're pushing your messaging out to these different segments. So like, for example, adjusting your ad dollars into, say, your existing customers when they are within a normal repeat purchase window that you have, and maybe pulling away from the day after or the week after they initially purchased, or several years down the line, and really trying to hone in. Okay, when's the time that they're likely going to be looking for a repeat purchase of your product or maybe even your service, and marketing to them at the exact time that they fit within that window. Third, looking at discover. So realizing that each channel performs differently for each of your audience types, and that you should study CLV across these channels to help inform where to spend on initial acquisition of new customers, as well as like the best channels to drive repeat purchasers. So for some examples here, so email and display remarketing. They may be good at driving repeat engagement, whereas, say, Google search or Google shopping may be better at driving new customers. And then going through the data that you have within each channel and trying to figure out, okay, where do I see the data points that support what channel is best for what type of audience? And there's a likelihood that there's going to be several that overlap. And so learning how to optimize those and adjust your advertising dollars to optimize that section and really maximize your profitability. And that leads us into learn, which is basically developing an understanding of where you acquire purchasers that are likely to become a loyalist. What cadence do the customers currently repeat a purchase? Which channels are effective at driving loyalty? Because overall, these are like key factors to optimize towards your CLV. And I do want to call out here the image on the right, which basically represents the customer's journey. So starting off in the awareness phase, where a customer may be doing or understanding that they have a problem or they need something or a product, and they're doing their own due diligence and research to figure out, who's offering a solution. They're starting to consider, they move down to the consideration phase, considering who to purchase from, whether it be our brand or a few of our other competitors, and then into the conversion section, where they actually convert on our product. Now, the important part here is that lifetime value is really moving customers down this funnel into that lifetime value section, which is synonymous to loyalty. Sometimes you'll see loyalty there as well, but I'd really even add another section down there right below that, which maybe could be advocacy, where users are starting to, past purchasers, loyalists are starting to advocate products to their friends, family, or even providing, great reviews on site towards your product, which definitely is a big factor when it comes to back to that awareness phase when people are starting to do research for your brand or your product. I want to move on here now to identifying your most valuable customers. And I want to start off first with some vocab words here. Customer centricity, and basically this means how to increase profits from your best customers, find more customers like these users, and avoid overinvesting in the rest, which was mentioned here by Jim Stern. So that leads us into the Pareto principle, or what most of us know as the 80-20 rule. Where basically 20% of customers are responsible for 80% of a brand's revenue. If this is the case in your brand, in your company, this is normal. But the issue that we have is that while 80% of our revenue typically comes from, say, 20% of our customer base, our media spend typically does not reflect, that dynamic. And so that's why it's important to identify existing and potential loyalists and allocate, ad spend towards them and others, while we pull away from some of the areas that maybe we are spending currently too much advertising spend on. And that's where understanding CLV, understanding the different segments, patterns, all that comes into play, where we're really trying to maximize the profit, and then even find new users. So that doesn't mean that we want to pull away from, fully from the 80% of users who only bring in, say, 20% of our revenue. But it's really about looking into that data a little more closely and maybe finding customers who fit more of the 20% of the our current users, dynamic and demographics and whatnot, and being able to optimize our spend towards them. And what things can we be doing within our marketing that will push people down that funnel a little more towards becoming, a loyalist or advocating our brand.
And just to pop in here,
Yeah.
so the 80-20 rule, just like a life hack, is great to apply to everything you're doing as a marketer. Most of the time, it's so easy to get bogged down. I use it like on a daily basis, and it's definitely one of the things that we look at when we're looking for our segmentation around CLV as well. So I'll talk more about that later too, but hit the nail on the head right there.
Yeah, I definitely notice that often, even when I'm not looking for it. I
Right.
just kind of do some data, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, 80-20.
Yeah.
So it's definitely like a phenomenon, right? It's awesome to see, and it's definitely something that you can apply to a lot of things. So
Yeah.
definitely be on the lookout for that. And now
Yeah,
we'll move in
I
real
know.
quick. Sorry, go ahead, Anson.
Sorry, I was just going to say Dan seems to agree, just said yes in the question. So
Yeah.
definitely speaking this language there. And I know, Polly, like you mentioned, you're going to be talking about it a little bit more in depth and implementation of it as well. So glad that we have some audience input there, that they're really excited about that. So
Yeah, we're not making this stuff up, folks. Definitely happens. So, but moving on to knowing the actual KPIs. So they're going to be, we have a couple sections like this, but this is going to be more around the actual CLV specific KPI. So I want to go through these pretty quickly and just provide a little bit of background. Some of the things you might be looking at when you're talking about CLV. So customer repeat rate, which it sounds, exactly as it is. How effective are you at turning one-off customers into repeat purchasers? So you can think of it as like the number of total purchases versus the number of unique purchasers to kind of get that metric. The average number of orders, you can evaluate this in whole for your whole site, in one-off purchasers and whatnot, which may skew the data a little bit, or for repeat purchasers, which gives us a little bit of an idea of maybe the average of what a loyalist may, how many times they may purchase. So again, it just indicates how many orders people are actually completing. A positive shift in this metric means that you are effectively reacquiring customers and keeping them in that funnel, which is definitely the goal, is to try to bring that average number of orders, say quarter over quarter up. And this metric can also be used to identify where a customer begins to fall off, which I think is very important as well. So if a customer between, once we get to the third conversion, they begin to fall off, we notice a dip in the average number of orders, then that could be an area where we start to take a look at and see, okay, what are we currently doing to advertise towards those users? And then from there, we may need to boost investment on reacquisition at that time to try to bring that number of average orders up. CLV of the one-time versus repeat customers. So this can basically be thought of as the AOV for a one-off purchase versus the CLV for a repeat purchaser. This really does help show the difference in value between those two cohorts and how we should kind of treat them a little bit differently here, and really the value of moving someone from a one-off purchaser into repeating and a repeat customer, because typically a repeat customer's value is much higher than a person who's just one-off buying from your site or from your brand. And then lastly here, total CLV. So you can plug in both either like one-off and repeat customers into this equation. And it's really to understand, again, looking at this value, if it's going up, the goal is obviously to bring it up quarter over quarter. And once we do that, it's really trying to understand, okay, how often are people coming back? And the idea is to move the needle towards acquiring more loyalists and maximizing that CLV, which basically means having these customers spend more on site, per engagement, and engaging more often. Cool. And I want to move on here a little bit to measuring your brand CLV. So one thing to note here is it's important not to scare yourself off or scare yourself away from CLV, thinking that it's way too complicated. This is definitely an experience that we've had with clients and trying to walk them through this and helping and assisting. And they also don't feel like they have enough of the right tools out there. But there definitely are great tools out there, and Windsor Circle being one of them. And Polly will be talking a little bit about that today and some of the things that we could be doing to not be so afraid of like CLV and get a better understanding of it. And this is great because the basic CLV understanding here of using like a simple, what can I talk right now? Sorry, a simple equation. I think I drank too much coffee this morning. I was trying to get all hyped up for the webinar.
That happens.
So this simple equation here, it can give a basic CLV understanding, and it can be used just by having your existing client and cart data. So CLV, looking at the average order value times the average number of orders in a specific time frame, multiply the average percent profit margin, right? So that's just like an easy way to start to look at it using data that you already have within your channels and on site.
Yeah, and Jason, just want to interject there. So I know a question that we can get a lot is, of course, measuring CLV can be a little daunting. And I think you hit it in the head that these metrics are available to you and should be readily available to you to make this equation somewhat simple. And of course, we can dive a lot more into it, which Polly will be doing. But at the same time, if you just are looking at it from a high level view, there are equations such as this that you can look at. And I know that we talk about brand profitability in a little bit here. But yeah, just wanted to clarify that this is all, in fact, metrics that you can pull pretty easily, right?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, some of it can be, it may seem a little nuanced, on the surface, but definitely, taking a look a little deeper, these should be all things that you can gather and use, and just really to get started. And the more you get comfortable with it and kind of dive deeper, you'll start to hopefully see that, the different patterns and things that you can use to improve the overall CLV of your business and profit.
Yeah, great. Thanks for clarifying that, Jason. And the other thing that I did want to mention too is that obviously now we're going to talk a little bit about brand profitability. Did want to kind of zoom through this section pretty briefly. I know we have some complicated formulas coming up, but I also do want to make sure that we leave enough time to actually talk about the takeaways and what you can implement on Polly's side and then on our side as well, Jason. So just wanted to give you a little bit of heads up there.
Cool. So I do want to zoom through, like you said, this section here, so you guys can kind of read through these formulas. Again, some things that are very easy to kind of plug things in and play. But there's one quote here that really stuck with us, which came from a client. And our client basically told us during a meeting on site was that percentage signs don't go into the bank, dollars do. So we all had a little giggle and stuff, but I mean, it definitely makes sense, right? We often hear in the news that, Apple is up, say X% this quarter, and that's because their profit is up, right? And not necessarily because, their ROAS is up in a certain campaign on AdWords or something like that, but it's because the advertising dollars and what they've been using, or, anywhere else as well, is increasing their overall profits as a whole, as a business. And that's an important distinction and thing to think about when you're talking about overall profitability and CLV. So again, basic formulas here to establish profitability, and they can be done both for e-com. So we have an e-com one here at the top and lead gen here at the bottom. And it's really just a start to recognizing actual dollar value impact on your advertising efforts. And real quickly here as well, I want to go through expanding your profit evaluation. So the first part here, calculate gross profit. So using that e-commerce or lead gen formula I had, in the previous slide. So, again, that's kind of self-explanatory. But moving into, adding into existing reporting. So implementing this data at a channel, campaign, or even a keyword level. In AdWords, you can do this using custom columns, or you can add them in custom reports in GA via the custom metric section. But the area I really want to spend a little bit more of the time on is expanding the scope of evaluation. We'd consider this probably the most important part here. And it's about applying profit calculations to a site-wide level. For example, what is the profitability of my total ad spend to my total site sales, which is definitely something that we're looking more at a higher level and not just in the weeds all the time at a specific keyword and a specific campaign in a specific account, and understanding what everything as a whole does to their site and to their business. And it's kind of very important to do this to see the forest through the trees, so to speak. So you can see everything as a whole rather than just getting so caught up in one thing over another. This will allow us to kind of double down on, say, our most profitable strategies, while being careful not to pull away from areas or channels who are part of the conversion path, but not showing great profit in, like, say, granular reporting. Like, for example, I would not expect great profits for, say, a display or YouTube campaign on their own. But obviously, they can be very, very important in generating, say, brand awareness and demand for new customers, while also maintaining that conversation with your current existing customers, right? So the more of a piece of prospecting. And that leads to, don't look at these prospecting types of campaigns to evaluate profitability, because the nature and the value of the campaign isn't the same as, say, direct click to conversion, like, say, a shopping type of campaign would be. So taking that step back to look at what we are actually spending versus what we are actually bringing in at a site-wide level can give you just a better and more clear picture of the impact that your current advertising dollars are having. And the last section here, before before I move it over to Polly for a little bit, is knowing your KPIs, but add a profitability consideration. So real quick here, margin or weighted margin. So it basically means how much do our products cost, roughly. Micro level profit. So looking at profits at a smaller individual acquisition campaign type, or, say, channel levels. But I think the bigger picture here is macro level profit, and understanding the bigger picture in regards to site-wide returns and what your advertising dollars are doing to that metric as a whole. So I do want to pass it off here to Polly, if you want to take that away.
Sure. And just to reiterate what you said, that site-wide level information is gold. So always good to look at that. So I'm glad you were calling that out, Jason. Yeah, so one of the things we're going to talk about, and then we'll talk about email marketing strategies as well, is knowing your customer. And a lot of that has to do with, honestly, your data and getting in there and getting to know it. So when you're trying to identify these segments and understand your customer base, because that's really where you start when you're talking about customer lifetime value and how to even market to your customers via email or advertising in a way that resonates with them, you need to do an audit of your CRM database. And then from there, you need to identify your target segments. So, who is going to be ripe for repurchasing, or who are my influencers and my loyalists, or who are my evangelists? Who can I count on to go tell 10 of their friends about this and tag us in social media because they love us so much? And then apply those lists where you can, right? So Google, remarketing, Gmail, any similar audiences, even Facebook, and sort of where can you find the biggest bang for your buck? And it might be certain segments work in certain places better than others. So when you're going through this, make sure to really test, like, hey, maybe I have a, best customer segment, and they're really, or a lookalike audience, right? Based on that, and it's great on Facebook, but it's not doing the same thing on Google. right? So that might be something where you can start kind of looking at those segments, understanding how they all function together, and then on a channel basis as well. Let me see if we can get to the next slide here. Yeah, okay, well, we're going ahead.
It does lag a little bit.
There's a little bit of a lag here. Okay, so we're gonna be talking about audience segmentation for new lifetime customers. And I'm gonna keep this super high level. So really, like we were talking about, it's about choosing your high value segments. And it's about applying that 80-20 rule to help you focus your efforts. So there's a lot you can be doing, and there's a lot of data out there. And when you're doing these data audits, it's really easy to go down that rabbit hole. And then all of a sudden you're looking at a micro segment of 7 people and you're going, what am I doing? So finding ways to kind of hone in on those segments is extremely helpful. And so I just want to highlight 2 methods for looking at segments that you can kind of add to your arsenal. So one is using escalation points, and one is product-based segments. So I'm going to be showing you how we do this within our app or our platform. You can do this by hand. It is a little bit more manual in that way, but just wanted to put that out there. So the first one is using escalation points. So like I will be saying time and time again, and Anson's heard me on every webinar I've done with CPC Strategy, just talk about data nonstop, is letting data help you. So on the left, you can see this is one of our insight charts from our platform, and it's looking at customer lifetime value by number of purchases. So what you can do is kind of hone in, and for their entire database, right? We're not looking at a specific segment right now. You can hone in on where you're seeing either large jumps in data, or maybe you're looking at average order value and number of purchases, and you're seeing gaps, and how can you use this information to help you push that CLV. So you're looking for any trends, and then building out marketing campaigns for each threshold. So in this particular example, right, there's about an $80 difference, $82 difference between the 4th and the 5th purchase. This is a pretty steady stream until you get to that 9th purchase, but there's a $185 difference between the 7th and the 8th purchase. So really what you want to be looking at here is, what campaigns can you be putting in there to get people to that 8th purchase, or even, you know, from their 4th to the 5th? Alternatively, where you're seeing smaller increases in CLV, what are the campaigns you can be running to increase the spend by the customer? So how are you going to optimize your campaign to bring in more dollars, right? So can you even move the needle in terms of the CLV within each bucket as well? Because those are trends that will change over time. So that's just one kind of instance of where you could look in order for escalation points. So look for those jumps in the data, those gaps, and figure out how you can use the marketing campaigns at your disposal to then create a campaign to either push purchases or push the AOV higher. And we'll talk about how to do that a little bit more in a second. The other thing is looking at your product-based segments. So if you know your overall CLV, so this top example here, you're looking at one-time customers have a CLV of $39, repeat customers have 102, your loyal customers have a 422, and your entire customer base is $107. So that's a pretty big, what's the word I'm looking for? Threshold, right? Like there's a lot going on there. Obviously you want to push people towards that loyal customer phase because that's a huge CLV compared to the rest. But now you have a baseline for all of your customers. You know it's 107, and you know your first time purchasers aren't that, it's not that high, and it's below that average CLV, obviously. So how do you get them from $39 up to at least 107 or more? So you're looking for trends in your different segments. Here you can compare your segment CLV to your overall CLV. And then from there, you understand which segments are driving a higher CLV and where you should be spending your time. So there's 2 examples here. The segment CLV examples, you have repeat purchases from a certain time period. So this, you can see their CLV is $541. So that's even more than your loyal customers. So you might want to look at what was going on during that time period. Maybe it was during the holidays and what campaigns you were running. Maybe it was, I don't know, you had a huge flash sale, or you specialize in a particular seasonal good, like something for summertime. Maybe it's like barbecue grills, right? And 4th of July is coming up, something like that. So understand what might be going on there to drive such a high CLV, and then capitalize on that. Can you do this again? And can you scale it, right? Same thing with purchasers of product Y, right? This bottom one, their CLV is huge. So now you know people who tend to buy this product tend to have a higher CLV. And with that information, you can go and say, okay, how do I run more campaigns to push this particular product into people? Like, where does that make sense to do cross-selling or upselling opportunities? Maybe it's a new workflow, right? Or it becomes one of your featured products. So using this information to really help drive your campaigns and your product marketing really is a great way to do that. And there's lots of ways you can do that. I just wanted to kind of highlight those top two. So just to give you some other segments to explore for, excuse me, now I can't speak, escalation points, CLV by number of purchases, by day of purchases, even by time of purchase, which is super relevant if you're doing advertising, because you might see there's a higher CLV for people who purchase, you know, on Wednesdays and Thursdays between the times of 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. So maybe you're spending more ad dollars during that time on a particular platform than you would otherwise. So ways to help kind of couch what your spend is instead of just doing blanket advertising. And then same for segments. You have CLV by product, by category, even by channel, by number of page views or number of events, and by geography. It could be that your product resonates really well with the East Coast, but isn't taken as well on the West Coast, right? I don't know what it would be, but just you can kind of look at these comparisons and understand where you might want to focus in your advertising buckets as well.
Yeah, and Polly, before we do move on here, we did have an interesting question from Jay coming in, and here she was wondering, so when you're looking at just escalation points or CLV segments to look at, is there one that you would really push for people to look at the most, or is the most common, or you see, I guess, the most return from?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the things that's really important to look at is sort of the one I'm showing you. If I can get back there, maybe having some lag time issues over here. So the CLV, but looking at number of purchases, because if you're seeing random drops, like that's not good. So I would say take that in conjunction with your average order value for number of purchases, and you'll start to understand, like, if you're seeing these small purchases all of a sudden on like the third purchase, you know that's somewhere you need to kind of fix. Right. It also gives you kind of your pie in the sky goal, right? Like, okay, my end goal is to get them above a threshold of, so our loyal customers was what? It was like $422. So looking at this chart, you want to get them at least to their, I'm squinting a little bit here, sorry, their like seventh purchase. So how do you do that, right? And how do you push people down that funnel more? That would be where I would start, just because it's sort of your overall all-encompassing piece.
Great. Yeah, hopefully we answered your question there, Polly, and appreciate it. Or not, Polly. Thanks for answering the question, Polly, and hopefully we answered your question there, Jay. Polly, I'll let you move on to the next section here.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, so we're going to talk about CLV email marketing strategies. And the first place where I want to start is sort of like, how do you increase CLV, right? And so CLV increases when you actually add value. I know that sounds rudimentary and kind of redundant, but it's important to acknowledge. There's this graph you'll see, or chart you should see on the right-hand side of the screen, which is an elements of value pyramid. And this is built essentially to show that there's certain things you can do to increase value that you are giving customers, right? So there's sort of like there's a minimum standard of quality. So like if your product doesn't have a high quality, you're not going to do really well in terms of adding value to your customers anyways. So that's kind of like a blanket. Your product needs to be at least good enough. But from there, you can kind of think about your customer base and understand what might be important to them and what your product provides, right? And then pick and choose elements from kind of all over this chart to create a relevant, valuable campaign or almost feeling, I guess is the way to put it, for your customers. So essentially, this looks a lot like Maslow's hierarchy of needs chart. The only difference is you don't need to get everything on each level covered in order to move to the next one, right? To increase that value. Essentially, what they've found is strong performance on multiple elements correlates strongly with higher and sustained revenue growth. So it might be that you sell, I don't know, a type of like health supplement, right? And so it's high quality, so you're checking that box. There's the emotional side of you've got wellness covered and maybe therapeutic value. And you have a great, robust rewards program. So there's this affiliation belonging in the life-changing section. So right there, you're covering 4 bases already. A lot of the bigger companies, when I was reading through this article, I believe were anywhere like from like 11 to 13 sort of values that they were going for, if that gives you an idea. You don't have to get all of them because that's kind of crazy. But it's an important part to kind of think about in terms of these values. When you create value for your customer, it will increase the value they put in you and will then increase their customer lifetime value, right? And that might also change between segments. So your best customers might value different things than, say, your one-time buyers, where it might be it saved them time and it was an easy checkout process, right? And it was a quality good. Versus your, people who buy one specific product over and over and over again, right? So just something to think about when you're thinking about segmentation and your marketing and how CLV plays into that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add there. Sorry, Paulie. That pyramid is awesome. I mean, I could just think off the top of my head, just like certain products and brands that I'm into personally that definitely check off these boxes that I may not in the past have ever really thought about. But I just get, like you said, this feeling inside when I use or I buy a product or I engage with that brand. So that's pretty awesome. I like that visual there.
Thanks. Yeah, and so this actually, I grabbed this from a Harvard Business article. The link should be at the bottom of this slide, so when you get those, you'll be able to get to that as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Harvard Business.
Yeah. And so basically, when I'm thinking about email marketing, I'm thinking about obviously customers and putting them into buckets, right? So that 80-20 rule of like, okay, where do we start in terms of this high level? So you have your subscribers in your browsers, you have your current customers and your churning customers, and they all have different goals, right? So goals with subscribers and browsers is the first conversion. Your current customers is continued conversions, right? Churning customers is drawing your customers back in. And there's campaigns that are associated with all of these. And CLV can play a part in all of this, and driving that CLV should be part of that as well. So here I've listed some of the campaigns that you probably want to think about implementing if you're currently not, to kind of help drive that relevancy and that buying life cycle for your customers as well. Obviously, the goal with all these is to get people into that VIP evangelist bucket within your current customers. But just wanted to put that out there. Not going to spend too much time on that slide.
And Polly, before we do go on to the next slide, we have a question from Eugene here. And he was wondering, so I think you can kind of segment this out. Subscribers or buyers are probably going to be more top of the funnel. So in terms of cart recovery, browse abandonment, would you recommend incorporating those like top of the funnel strategies with like the mid to low funnel audience as well? Like, so I think they're alluding to the current customers, with continued conversions. Would you still be very active in terms of cart recovery, or would you be a little less aggressive on that? And then Jason, maybe get your take on that as well.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think cart recovery and browse abandonment are helpful across the board.
Nice.
Once someone is, it's a little more nuanced though, where like once someone is a customer, it may not be where you need to give them a 10% discount every time to get them to come back, because they are currently buying from you and have been buying from you. So you're going to want to look at sort of your data points and see, like, do you need to be adding that extra discount, or do you need to just like remind them it's in their cart and be like, hey, we've saved your curated list of products, you know what I mean? So how can you get around always giving someone a coupon? Because we also don't want to train customers to only buy when they have a discount code.
Yeah, and I want to kind of piggyback off of what Paulie was saying there. Is the cart recovery for sure is something we use across the board, at least in AdWords and whatnot. But as Paulie was mentioning, the messaging could be very different. Again, if they are that customer who's been there before, we may not, like Paulie said, need to give that same message of percentage off or whatnot, but still re-engaging them because they are abandoning cart, for example, is still important for sure.
Yeah, great. Thanks for both of your opinions there. And Eugene, hopefully we were able to answer your question.
Cool. And so from there, this actually was a great question to segue into this. So talking about segments based on CLV, within each bucket of customers, right? If you know your CLV or even future CLV, which is something that on the Windsor Circle side, we predict based on many factors of the behavior and what they purchased and things like that, you can modify your offers and promotions, right? So a high future CLV, or if they're in a segment that has a high CLV, you might give them a more aggressive offer or VIP treatment, right? So it may not need to be a coupon, as I was saying, but it might be something where, they get a free sample of something, or they're, welcomed into the VIP club and they get sneak previews of your new line that's coming out, things like that. You see that a lot happening during, I think Nordstrom's does it actually. One of their rewards programs, you get essentially shopping benefits ahead of the curve. So when they launch a new line of clothing for fall or summer, it's blocked for everybody else, but you get access to it. So things like that can be really, really nice carrots in terms of creating that engagement. Where a low CLV or like a lower future CLV, they might get your standard treatments, right? You don't go spending lots of dollars on them and gangbuster deals and things like that. So something to think about there, and just kind of, since you know your overall CLV and individual CLV, you can create these high, medium, and low CLV micro segments for each customer bucket. So kind of beat that horse to death a little bit there, but it's important to understand, like, you have your segments, and then you can go even further beyond that, looking at sort of what your average CLV is as well. And then lastly, when you're looking at doing these email campaigns, personalization is really key, right? So the goal of marketing is using CLV to drive these higher revenues and creating these longer lasting relationships with clients, and personalizing your messaging is really key to that. So the stat on the side, personalized email messages improve click-through rates by an average of 14% and conversions by 10%. That's like no laughing stat right there. Like, that's quite a bit of money. So every time someone's visiting your site or interacts with you on social or purchase from you, you're collecting this data, or you should be, and now you can use that to your advantage. So common things to personalize would be, your recommended product section. Can you be pulling in dynamic products based on what someone's purchased in the past, or highlighting that product that has a really high CLV correlated with it, right? If you're doing a reminder campaign to come back and repurchase. So if say they buy face cream from you and they purchase it on a regular basis, can you pull in those products and then recommended ones as well with that? Obviously use first name. Maybe there's geography-based information you should be using. Like, I used to live in Boston. There was really terrible winters, and maybe someone would send me an email that had 20% off on all snow shovels and snow plows because they knew a giant storm was headed my way, right? Like, that would be a super relevant way to kind of engage a certain base of your customer based on what's going on in the world. So just things to think about when you're kind of delving into these campaigns. And I think with that, I hand back to you, Jason. It works. There you go.
Awesome.
Yep.
Perfect. Thanks, Polly. So yeah, I do want to move real quickly. I know we don't have too much time left here, but it's really about using some of these advertising strategies to acquire, retain, and grow. And a lot of these too will kind of mix with a bit of what Polly was talking about on the email side. But I want to go through again a little quickly here. So initially, acquiring these conversions with the goal of continued growth in net new customers. So there's a lot of data on these next few slides, or a lot of words, so definitely feel free to kind of read through them. But again, the ultimate goal here is continued growth in net new customers. So filling that top of the funnel. So via some prospecting campaigns on maybe display within the GDN, Facebook prospecting as well to customers who are may have never been to the site before, but maybe fit a certain demographic. And really trying to fill that top of the funnel. To generate demand, just again by getting in front of customers at this awareness phase. Again, when you're thinking about that chart, the customer journey and how they move down that, making sure we're in front of them during that portion when we know that they're looking and searching for either a service we offer or a product we offer to fill a need that they have. Pushing customers down the funnel. So the importance here is just staying in front of these customers through every part of their purchase journey, whether that be through email and looking at some of the CLV lists that Polly was mentioning, or whether they fit within certain audiences within your AdWords campaigns as well, and just remaining visible across these channels as a consideration phase starts to push through, where they're coming out of that awareness, going down into consideration, and then lastly, optimizing towards that site profit. So evaluating your ad spend again as a percentage of total revenue and total site performance, and that's to just maximize or help maximize your investment across all your channels. To understand that if you're doing some prospecting here and you're not just looking at, okay, did that prospecting give me 10 conversions out of ROAS that I'm happy with, but when I push that prospecting campaign during this time period, what happened to my site overall orders and revenue? Because there's a lot of times where that changes and that improves, and then looking at that dynamic and how that plays in what your overall profit was during that period, and if we did see some growth there. And that also, again, we've talked about a lot too, is understanding that each channel's role in the eventual capture of that profit for your site. Re-engaging buyers, right? So that's moving down a little bit further. The goal here is to increase repeat purchase rate and overall CLV So again, a lot of text here, but basically, I'm going to kind of go through in order here is identifying your top performing customers through these value-based segments. So again, the recency of when they've purchased, the frequency of purchase that they've done, what their past revenue was, and then what their future expected value is should, when we're looking at our, say, our average customer or some of our loyalists, what their future expected value would be if they were to continue down this path. You want to be ramping up re-engagement with these remarketing strategies. Again, email being one of them that Polly was mentioning. You can target recent and inactive purchasers via AdWords in the RLSA section, which we've actually seen a lot of examples where I've taken like customer match emails of users who have actually unengaged from our content, and then being able to re-engage them again when they're obviously on Google doing searches for products or services that we sell. We've had a really high success rate of getting them back, which then if we were to do the analysis on CLV, hopefully we'd start to see that we're starting to grow that and starting to bring those customers back from maybe a single purchase to a multiple purchase, and hopefully eventually into a loyal list. Personalizing content based on customer value at every stage of the funnel. So again, Polly mentioned this throughout her portion of the presentation. So whether it be product launches, price alerts, special offers, whatever happens to be, adjusting the personal content, whether it is an action on your site or something that's happening with your brand, as well as where that user fits within a certain audience. Are they considered a loyal customer? Maybe you're offering them something a little different, using a little different messaging versus someone who is just maybe a new visitor or has purchased once before and maybe a low CLV value. And then lastly here, maximizing each channel's strength. So again, as we discover and understand what channels do well with what audiences and messaging, we can start to maximize the strength of each of these channels, make sure we're showing the right message, make sure the right message is showing up on the right platform at the right time. Again, it sounds like we have to get all the planets to align, but as you start to look at this data, it definitely can become very clear in certain places and start to just shape your marketing dollars and looking at, again, at the end of the day, how your profit of your site is adjusting when you're making these changes and adjusting your ad spend in certain areas. And I believe lastly here is prospecting new high value customers. So with the last goal here is just finding new customers based on your existing customers, right? So we've talked about this a lot as well, is leveraging your current existing customer data, maybe your loyalist data or VIP data, and create similar lists, similar or LAL, which basically lookalike lists. If you're doing like Facebook, very similar to what it's basically the same thing as what you'd see on Google as a similar list. And uploading, again, I mentioned this a little bit earlier too, uploading customer match lists for some of your top customers so that Google can kind of work together to either retarget those users or even find similar lists to some of those users of different demographic data or usage data that are people who are very similar to what your top customers would be. Harvest the audience matching expertise of Google and Facebook, again, similar and lookalike audiences, and then use these audiences on GDN for everything: search, display, video, and lookalike specifically on Facebook, which again is basically just what similar audiences would be on Google. Use audience insights reporting for additional data points. So analyzing your top customer data for further insights, and then layering these insights into existing similar audiences for, again, new prospecting, trying to find and fill the top of that funnel. And then lastly, keep evaluating and scaling. And this is something we want to do with everything, whether it is having to do with customer lifetime value or not. Evaluate what you're doing and figure out how to scale and improve on performance of what you've been working on. So continuing to analyze the data for your top converters and use this data to not only just define further audiences, but also to inform whether it be your marketing messaging or where your advertising dollars are going. And
yeah, great.
With that
Thanks,
said, I believe that's it.
And wrapping it up in a pretty timely manner here. Skipping the recap, Paul, I did want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about if people want some more information through about Windsor Circle or just anything new that through the research that you're doing or any breaking news. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your newsletter?
Sure. So we have a bi-monthly newsletter. It covers recent blog articles, upcoming webinars, recordings, webinars, case studies, how-to guides, etc. So any new content we're sort of blasting out that way. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up at windsorcircle.com/newsletter. Or if you're interested in seeing a demo of the What Counts Windsor Circle platform, you can do that by requesting a demo at windsorcircle.com/demo.
Awesome, thanks. Thanks, Polly. And again, did want to just thank our speakers. We are at the top of the hour here, and wanted to thank our audience members for sticking with us. Unfortunately, we did not have enough time for Q&A, but we did ask a few questions, and hopefully we were able to answer some of your pressing questions throughout the webinar. Again, Jason, thanks again. Always a pleasure having you as a part of these webinars. And Polly, it's always great working with Windsor Circle and now What Counts, and definitely looking for more webinars in the future. And again, to the audience members, hopefully we were able to provide some value to you throughout this hour, and hopefully you were able to take some things as it relates to CLV and how to implement it into your strategy. But with that being said, that is it from us over at CPC Strategy and Windsor Circle. Again, this is Anson Hahn and CPC Strategy signing out from sunny San Diego. Hope you have a great rest of your day.